Hi everyone, welcome to Difference Frames the World, a permanently demonetized channel to review world affairs from a different angle. In the past 2 years, we have tried our best to keep DFTW alive with the help of patrons and supporters, but we cannot update the channel regularly due to financial restraints. Still, we do our best to upload new videos multiple times a month. We are sorry that we cannot upload videos daily as we did before December 2021, when YouTube demonetized our channel permanently for lack of educational value to viewers. We had to slow down and upload fewer videos each month, but it was still hard for us, as we had to make a living first. One viewer told us not to beg for money anymore, and we respected his advice. We have to work on other things to make a living first. We beg to be different as content creator, not as beggar. We sincerely thank our supporters and patrons for not leaving us, even if we cannot keep the channel moving forward without hiccups. Their help keeps DFTW alive, and we do not have lose our dignity to remain independent. Today we talk about de-dollarization, a topic hotly discussed worldwide. Many things have happened recently. At the end of last month, Brazil claimed to use RMB, not US dollars, as the currency for business between Brazil and China. 2 days ago, another South American country, Argentina, announced it would buy Chinese products with China's RMB, not America's dollar. It is noteworthy that South America has been the backyard to the United States for decades, but more and more countries there are getting away from the US dollar. Brazil and Argentina are not alone, as Russia and Iran abandoned the US currency much earlier. After the Ukraine war broke out, some Western countries sanctioned Russia, and the US even kicked many Russian banks from the SWIFT system, using the dollar as a lethal weapon against Moscow. Russia survived and thrived without the dollar. The United States suffered and is still suffering, though. In a previous video 1 year ago, we pointed out that the US dollar hegemony would collapse if Washington excluded Moscow from the SWIFT system. It is coming true. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said 2 weeks ago that America's unilateral sanctions undermined the dominance of US dollar, which means the U.S. government knows it. Still, Yellen implied the U.S. might use the $300 billion of stolen Russian foreign exchange reserve to rebuild Ukraine. The Western countries do not provide free military aid to Kyiv, and everything has a price. Ukraine was one of the most undeveloped nations worldwide before the war started in February 2022. After the war, the country's situation might be even worse, unable to pay the Western countries for their obsolete weapons. Washington, Berlin, Warsaw, London, and others sent outdated garbage to Kyiv, hoping Ukraine could pay them jewelry's price later. Ukraine does not and will not have the money to enrich its so-called Western benefactors. As a result, Russia's $300 billion robbed by the US could possibly serve the purpose. The question now is whether Washington will be so short-sighted as to ruin its dollar hegemony in a suicidal way. Other countries and individuals than the US and Americans will be scared, fearing they will also suffer for using the US dollar, not their own currencies. It is happening, and the de-dollarization process is accelerating, 10 times faster in the past months than years ago. The number one currency used in China's cross-border transactions is not the US dollar anymore. Its own currency, RMB, has overtaken the dollar. It results from China's active promotion of bilateral trade settlement in RMB in transactions with other countries. On April 26, Argentine Economy Minister Felipe Massa announced that Argentina would stop using the US dollar to pay for imports from China and use the Chinese yuan. In early April, Malaysian Prime Minister said that Malaysia's central bank had begun discussions with China for settlements in their own currencies. On March 29, 2023, the Brazilian government said Brazil reached an agreement with China to stop using the US dollar as an intermediary currency. More than 30 countries, including Indonesia, Iran, Russia, and Germany, are gradually turning to the RMB in trade settlement or investment. Of particular note was the Saudis, who began selling their oil to Chinese companies in RMB. The petrodollar may become an archaic word shortly. More astonishing was TotalEnergies, a French company that is selling its LNG to China in RMB. France is the first U.S. ally that moves away from the U.S. dollar hegemony. We believe U.S. politicians must be furious. It is worth mentioning that the U.S. does not have its soldiers in France, which is one of the reasons Paris can occasionally say no to Washington. Dollar hegemony is the foundation of America's global dominance, and the United States does not hesitate to punish any country that is getting away from the U.S. dollar. 20 years ago, it attacked Iraq when the previous Iraqi leader accepted euro as a settlement currency. America's military power endorses the dollar hegemony. Might is right. The U.S. Army is not as mighty as it claims anymore. Its dramatic pullback from Afghanistan refreshed the world's memories about its unpleasant withdrawal from Saigon, showing the U.S. troops are not invincible as the U.S. president bragged about. According to U.S. media, the U.S. military used the Seahorse rocket launcher with the Philippines during the recent joint military exercise. In front of the Filipino president and the U.S. ambassador to Manila, the HIMARS system, which is said to be capable of covering a range of several hundred kilometers, launched 6 rockets, all of which missed the target, a retired warship from the Second World War. The antique warship was too stubborn, much to U.S. Army's surprise. The latter dispatched an F-35B fighter to send the unobedient ship to seabed, which was a late triumph, better than nothing. In a video uploaded several weeks ago, we praised the F-22 fighter, America's most advanced plane, for its first and only victory when it sent multiple missiles to shoot down the strayed Chinese satellite balloon. A recent report disclosed that a B-1B bomber's pilot was shocked to find a Chinese J-20 stealth fighter with his naked eyes, which his warplane's radar system had not located. The U.S. is retiring its F-22 planes and keeping its army with more cost-efficient F-35 fighters, which have more problems than one can possibly imagine. As a result, the U.S. Air Force does not view its Chinese counterpart as inferior as before. The U.S. military relies heavily on air superiority in combat, and the Iraq War had best illustrated it. However, the continuous growth of China's J-20 fleet has made the United States realize that it is becoming unrealistic to seize air supremacy at the gate of China. Maximilian Bremer leads the Special Programs Division at Air Mobility Command. He proposed a new concept to face China's challenge, saying the U.S. should not emphasize air superiority against China anymore. Instead, it needs to use an air denial strategy. When the U.S. is not confident that it can defeat the Chinese in the air, the world knows it too. Just as the U.S. military stand behind the dollar hegemony, China's quick return to its historical pinnacle as the world's most influential country in the past 3,000 years also makes the world believe RMB is a creditworthy currency. Unlike euro, behind which is a divided Europe, China's RMB benefits from the solid endorsement from a potent global power. Euro plays a primary role inside European Union, and it does not pose a fatal threat to the US dollar outside Europe, even though it is the second most important currency after the US dollar. RMB is different, and it has the potential to challenge the dollar hegemony in the future. China is the #1 trading partner for over 100 countries, and it does not have to use the US dollar as the only media when doing business globally. In a foreseeable future, US companies may have to pay RMB when importing Chinese products if Chinese suppliers no longer trust the purchasing power of those overprinted green bills. The US is now desperate and wants the world not to abandon the US dollar. Reports even say that the US is considering to include Russia in the SWIFT system again, when JP Morgan got the approval to process payments to Russian agriculture banks several days ago. Weaponizing the US dollar is a two-edged sword. It damages the dollar hegemony and drives people away from America's fiat money, piles of green paper excessively printed in the past decades. The dollar value has declined by over 90%, and the hard-earned US dollars in other countries are gradually becoming toilet paper. The US prints tons of green paper in exchange for cheap commodities from the rest of the world, maintaining a high living standard with the world's lowest consumer price. Some people are drawing the curtain to reveal the unprecedented Ponzi scheme, and the Brazilian president is one of them, calling for ending the dollar trade dominance. Rumors say a government agency in a North American country framed Brazilian President Lula several years ago. We hope he takes good care of his safety during his second presidency, although Brazil is not Iraq, and no one will hang him to death like the former Iraqi leader. At the end of the video, we need to clarify that even though the dollar is declining, we do not recommend viewers to sell their dollar assets before consulting with professionals because the US dollar will continue to play an essential role globally. China's RMB is also fiat money, not anchored to physical assets, and in the past decades, its value has declined dramatically. China also overprinted RMB to absorb excessive US dollars it has earned in the past decades, so China's money is also a piece of paper, not gold or silver. RMB internationalization is an option for the world economy, but the Chinese money will not replace the US dollar or the euro.